Alright, everyone. Welcome back to the Lockup Shutdown podcast. My name's Monica. Joining me, as always, is my good friend Zach. How's it going tonight?
It's going. Still recovering from everything Week 18 put me through. The first Week 18 lived up to the hype and might be the best ever Week 18. I don't know how another week could beat what we just witnessed the last 24, 48 hours.
It certainly has been a crazy time. It's our first episode of the playoffs, and today we'll talk about the infamous firing day, give our own personal opinions on the biggest awards in football, and wrap things up with our first ever official playoff brackets in lightning bracketeering, replacing the regular season's lightning fast picks. But first, as always, it's our biggest surprise from the week behind. Zach, get this engine revving.
I think my biggest surprise from Week 18 has to be all of Week 18. But in all seriousness, it was a crazy week. But I don't think anything was crazier than the Indianapolis Colts absolutely getting destroyed by the Jacksonville Jaguars in Jacksonville, where they haven't won since 2014, and it wasn't even close for much of the game, with the Jags up by 23 points with 5 minutes left, and the Colts got a late touchdown. But I can't even blame it on one person for the Colts. It seemed like if you're wearing a blue and white shirt, you messed something up at some point during the day, and that's what happens. And Jags win by 15, and it sends all hell loose in every game after that between the Steelers and Ravens and Chargers and Raiders, keeping us up because the Colts couldn't take care of business, which was shocking to me.
It certainly was a big shock for me and everyone else around the football world, but my personal biggest shock and surprise was the San Francisco 49ers as they beat the Rams 27-24 in overtime and brought themselves into the playoffs. Of course, last week you had predicted it. I predicted otherwise, saying that the Saints would make it into the playoffs just because the 49ers were going up against a tough Rams team, and with the game on the line for the 49ers, beating that team and they basically established themselves at a potential dark horse even in the playoffs that could potentially make their way into the Super Bowl, but we'll just have to see. Apart from 2 interceptions, Jimmy G, who has been pretty much criticized all season, even last season, despite the team's many injuries, and obviously the reason they drafted Trey Lance 4th overall this year, Jimmy G looked pretty solid. Apart from the 2 interceptions, he had a total of 300 plus passing yards on the day. Jimmy G looks solid, the team as a whole looks solid, everyone's playing in very good sync. The 49ers are a very good team this year, and though I'm surprised that they beat the Rams, in retrospect, maybe it's not quite as surprising.
Yep, every coach in sports and every fan says, oh, as long as you peak at the right time, you'll do great things. And I think that's exactly what this 49ers team is doing. And they've got one special dude that goes by the name of Deebo Samuel, who has set the record for most rushing touchdowns by a wide receiver in the modern era, and he continued to do that again this week against the Rams. Had 8 rushes for 45 yards as a wide receiver and a touchdown. Also chipped in with his 95 receiving yards and had a passing touchdown on the day as well. So Deebo Samuel seems to be the key for the 49ers, but I don't want to take any credit away from everyone else that has been huge for the Niners. Who would have thought Juwan Jennings would get 2 touchdowns in the game to get the Niners into the playoffs? And I think you're exactly right. They're a dark horse in the playoffs, and we'll see how far we have them going once we reveal our brackets to everyone else.
Absolutely. Let's move on and talk about today, which was firing day for all of you who are watching in the future. What do you think was the worst decision of today's firing day, as they call it?
I think the worst decision has got to be the Dolphins firing Brian Flores. The Bears fired their coach and GM. The Vikings fired their coach and GM, except the difference between the Bears, Vikings, and Dolphins is that the Dolphins went 9-8. The Bears and Vikings seem to be lucky to combine for 9 wins on the season. But no, the Dolphins beat the Patriots week 18 and win 8 of their last 9 games, but all of a sudden Brian Flores is without a job. So I think with all the young pieces that the Dolphins have, between Tua and Myles Gaskin, you got all the receivers as well. Jalen Waddle, who turning into a really good receiver. With the key pieces that they have, I think a young coach in Brian Flores is exactly what they needed. And right now, I didn't think that was going to be the best move for their franchise. And now you got to make do with another coach that's already unemployed for another reason.
Absolutely. I totally agree with you there. The firing of Brian Flores has to be the worst decision so far in firing day, though we can also talk about the fact that Greg Roman hasn't been fired yet, but that's for another day, for another Ravens fan, and whatever. Let's talk about Brian Flores. Despite the lack of offensive production this year, the Dolphins have proven themselves as a very, very, very powerful defensive team. I know I said it earlier in the season, and I'm going to say it again. This is a very good team with a very good defense. Obviously, they have a lot of young pieces that need to develop on offense, and we're going to start seeing them develop, but I feel like they would have developed better if Brian Flores continued to be their head coach. This guy was a former defensive coordinator for the Patriots under Bill Belichick. He's a very, very, very solid defensive-minded head coach. Any coach, really. Flores finished off the season with a win against the Patriots, which really should have secured him even like the slightest bit more of job security, but alas, we didn't see anything from that. I think that this move is going to go down for the Fins about in the same way that the Lions firing Jim Caldwell after a winning season went down. This is not going to be a very good move for the Dolphins at all, and I just don't think that it's going to be remembered to be anything more than a horrible, horrible decision.
Yep, I think Brian Flores could go to another team and be really successful, and you always hear about what happens with Bill Belichick's former assistant coaches when they become head coaches, and you go and see Brian Flores, and he has huge success sweeping the Patriots, who made the playoffs this season and finishing half a game outside of the playoffs. So to finish a half game outside the playoffs with I wouldn't say rookie quarterback, but Tua, who hasn't have a lot of experience, as well as the number one rookie receiver, is surprising to me that you would almost go all the way back to square one after all the progress you made and go 8-1 in your last 9 games. Doesn't seem right to me.
Absolutely. It's like playing snakes and ladders. Let's start talking about our various awards for this season. We'll start off with one of the simpler ones as we work our way all the way to the MVP of this season. But let's start off small and go with the Comeback Player of the Year. Obviously, last year we had Alex Smith, who was well deserving of the Comeback Player of the Year award. Personally, my pick for Comeback Player of the Year this year is another player coming off of a very, very bad leg injury, and that was Dak Prescott, who suffered a horrible leg injury earlier in the season last year, and this year has now led the Cowboys to an easy NFC East victory, a 12-5 record, and the 3rd seed. Last season, we saw the Cowboys perform absolutely horrendously with Andy Dalton and whoever else they had starting at quarterback on any given day. They looked awful. They lost the NFC East to the Washington football team of all teams. So Dak has made a massive difference in Dallas, and I think they're very, very pleased to have him back on the team from week 1 and onward.
Yeah, Dak is a special talent, and as a Washington football team fan, I know all too well how good he can be on when he's playing as good as he's able to. But I'm not going to go with Dak Prescott to win Comeback Player of the Year.
Interesting.
I think Joe Burrow is gonna surprise everyone and win the NFL Comeback Player of the Year. Threw for 4,600 yards this season, 34 touchdowns, and top 10 in QBR in the league. And the crazy thing is, he only played 16 games this season. He missed 2 games, but was still only 3 touchdowns behind Dak Prescott. Threw for more yards than Dak Prescott. So I think if Joe Burrow played in 2 extra games, he would have been much higher statistically than he actually was. So when you can't compare game by game, you go to percentage, and that's where it gets even better when you realize that Joe Burrow has over 70% completion percentage this season, and in his last 5 games, I know it's an overall season award, but last 5 games, 12 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. So I think Joe Burrow got better and better as the season went on, and he got more comfortable from his torn ACL. But even in those 16 games that he was playing, I think he was one of the best quarterbacks in the league, and is a big reason why the Bengals are all of a sudden AFC North division champions and hosting a playoff game this season.
Absolutely. I think that Joe Burrow might be a little bit young to get Comeback Player of the Year. I mean, you probably should have had at least one season before the injury season to really be considered in that reward, but I totally agree with what you're coming from. Joe Burrow is a very, very good quarterback, and we'll talk a little bit more about him later. In fact, we'll talk a little bit more of him very, very soon, because right now, we're moving on and talking about the Rookies of the Year, both Offensive Rookie of the Year and Defensive Rookie of the Year. We'll present them both at once for each of us. Why don't you start us off? Who are your Rookies of the Year?
I'll go first with my less controversial rookie, and I'll pick my Defensive Rookie of the Year, teammate with Dak Prescott. And no, it's not going to be the guy many of you think it's going to be in Trevon Diggs. It is going to be Micah Parsons. It is not going to be Trevon Diggs. It will definitely be Micah Parsons. Cowboys got a lot of good young rookies, but I don't think many are better than Micah Parsons in the season that he's put together for the Cowboys. 3 forced fumbles, 13 sacks, 64 total tackles, played in 16 games as well. So with how good Micah Parsons has been, the Cowboys not too long ago were saying that their biggest issue was their defense. I think he's a key reason why they are division champs, and have figured out their defense. No one says they're a bad defense right now, and he might be their best defensive player overall, not even best defensive rookie in the league. So Micah Parsons, you're my pick for Defensive Rookie of the Year.
I'm gonna have to stop you right there and say that Trevon Diggs is a sophomore in the league, so I mean, unless we want another Ben Simmons situation, I don't think we'll be having a Trevon Diggs Rookie of the Year anytime soon. But I have to totally agree with you on Micah Parsons. He's easily the most versatile and solid defender in the league. He finished the season with 13 sacks, which was just too short of the rookie sack record. Obviously, he went on a drought in the last handful of games in terms of sacks, but he was still one of the best defenders in the league this year. He looked like a veteran. He looked like a very solid player, and I have to agree with you. Micah Parsons has to be the defensive rookie of the year. I don't think I'm going to be picking him for defensive player of the year anytime soon. Zach, start us off with your surprising offensive rookie of the year.
My offensive rookie of the year, I said Joe Burrow won comeback player of the year, but I'm going to go with another quarterback to win offensive rookie of the year. A little bit out of spite, and I'm going to say Mac Jones could win offensive rookie of the year. We talked about completion percentage with Joe Burrow since he didn't play every game. If you look at the percentage from Mac Jones, 67.6%, 0.1% off from having the highest completion percentage ever by a rookie quarterback in the NFL. Dak Prescott threw for 67.7% his rookie year. Now, Mac Jones threw for 67.6%. So, between the 3,800 yards that Mac Jones threw for and the 92.5 passer rating on the season, 22 touchdowns as well, Mac Jones is done about as good as anyone could have hoped for. And for you saying you would take almost any other quarterback in the league week one, I think Mac Jones has obviously surprised you and surprised everyone else, which is why I think he's going to be rewarded with that luxurious offensive rookie of the year.
We'll just see what happens in the wild card round. Let's talk about the actual offensive rookie of the year rather than some kind of joke over there. Let's talk about Ja'Marr Chase, the best rookie wide receiver probably of all time, who now owns the record for most yards in a season by a rookie wide receiver, and owns the franchise record for the most receiving yards by a Cincinnati Bengal. Yes, more than Ocho Cinco ever could have hoped for. Ja'Marr Chase was top 5 in yards and touchdowns in this season, as a rookie, mind you. The Burrow-Chase connection is going to be the most incredible wide receiver quarterback duo for years and years to come. We're going to be seeing these two dominate the league forever and ever at this point, and I am more than happy to say that Ja'Marr Chase is going to be Offensive Rookie of the Year this year.
Ja'Marr Chase had a great Rookie of the Year, I'll give him that, and as much as I'll back Mac Jones up, it is tough to say too many bad things about Ja'Marr Chase, and I know in the beginning of the year we probably would have laughed at ourselves if our two picks for Offensive Rookie of the Year were Jones and Ja'Marr Chase, when Ja'Marr Chase said he couldn't catch a ball and you thought Mac Jones was, I don't even know what you thought he was going to be, not even an NFL-worthy quarterback. So both of these two have surprised us, and we'll have to see what happens in the real world. We can only have so much influence on the real world, and we'll see what ends up happening with those two, who will come out on top.
Absolutely. Let's talk about something a little more agreeable and talk about the Defensive Player of the Year award. I think we'll both be pretty much in agreement on who this is, as we were earlier in the season. But for the sake of formalities, tell me, who is your Defensive Player of the Year, Zach?
My Defensive Player of the Year has got to be TJ Watt. When you are able to tie an NFL record for most sacks in a season with Michael Strahan, you got to be doing something right. And wasn't long ago that his brother was winning Defensive Player of the Years, but now it's TJ Watt's turn, and he's able to get that Steelers team into the NFL playoffs, and credit to him for doing that, making every quarterback's life a living nightmare when they gotta play the Steelers. And I think he's gonna be duly rewarded for his efforts with that Defensive Player of the Year award.
It certainly feels like it was just yesterday we were talking about people like Chandler Jones and Trevon Diggs and Myles Garrett for this award, but this one 100% has to go to TJ Watt this year. That record is such a staple, and even if this were a normal 16-game season, TJ Watt still would have been close and still would have won Defensive Player of the Year with the amount of sacks that he had put up through 16 games. With the Steelers' offense having struggled all season long, they just haven't looked the same. TJ Watt has been the centerpiece and a defensive powerhouse that has completely torn through the league and ultimately has gained the 7th seed in the playoffs this season with a surprising loss from the Colts. I have to say that TJ Watt 100% is Defensive Player of the Year. I don't think there's any question about it. I don't think there's any doubt about it. I don't think there's anything more we can really say about it. TJ Watt is Defensive Player of the Year. Let's move on and talk about the other side of the ball. Who is your Offensive Player of the Year, Zach?
This might give it away, but we were talking about how impressive TJ Watt's season was to get his team into the playoffs. I'll give you a season that's even more impressive, yet his team still didn't even make the playoffs. And that is Jonathan Taylor, a part of the Colts' embarrassing loss to the Jacksonville Jaguars, but not talking about that game anymore. We'll talk about Jonathan Taylor and the season he had. Leads the league in rushing attempts, leads the league in rushing yards, leads the league in touchdowns. Not sure what else he can really do to prove that he is going to win Offensive Player of the Year. And he kept the Colts in games that it didn't even seem possible they were going to be in. Made up for some of the poor play they had around him. And sure, we thought Derrick Henry was going to win running back and maybe MVP, but now that he is gone, Jonathan Taylor has stepped into the spotlight and then some, clearly winning Offensive Player of the Year. And who knows, some might argue that he could win MVP if you're a diehard Colts fan. But at 22 years old, Jonathan Taylor stepped into the spotlight and shined the brightest out of any offensive player this season.
I think I might shock you with my pick on this one. I know we predicted each other's picks for each of these awards before we started the recording, but my pick for this award isn't Jonathan Taylor. I think that after capping off the season with a not-so-amazing performance, which ultimately is what wins things like Offensive Players of the Year awards and MVP awards, ultimately it's important to cap off the season with an absolute bang. Jonathan Taylor didn't do that, but I know one player who did with 100-plus yards in their game against the 49ers, and that was Cooper Kupp, who fell just 18 yards short of Megatron's season receiving record. Cooper Kupp has had one of the best seasons by a wide receiver in recent memory. Even with Matthew Stafford looking like the pick-six king throughout the year, Kupp has managed to make the biggest jump of his entire career from last year to this year. Cooper Kupp is a very, very solid receiver. It's not often you see a receiver of his archetype be just this good as he is. I think that Cooper Kupp has to be the Offensive Player of the Year this year.
Cooper Kupp is a hell of a offensive player. My only concern is that he had so many other weapons around him. If you got OBJ, Robert Woods for most of the season, Tyler Higbee, Cam Akers, Darrell Henderson, Matt Stafford, you got so many other weapons around you that they can't focus on just one player with the Rams offense. Going into a game against the Colts, you know the Colts are going to run it. You know it's going to be given to Jonathan Taylor, and you know Jonathan Taylor is going to get it a lot. Yet no one seemed to be able to stop it, which just amazed me week after week. And yeah, the Jags had one good week, but if you put that game in week 10, Jonathan Taylor would be the winner of the Offensive Player of the Year. So I'm not going to go based off the very last game of the season. And I think if you score 5 touchdowns in any single game, you should be rewarded for that. Not many players at any level can score 5 touchdowns, and he kept that pace up the entire season, as you saw, with more touchdowns than he played games. And I think that Jonathan Taylor, for that reason, will get the award over Cooper Kupp.
We'll certainly have to see. Those are two very, very, very talented receivers, and ultimately, that's not our decision, but we've given our opinions on who are the Offensive Player of the Year, Defensive Player of the Year, Rookies of the Year, and Comeback Player of the Year. Let's talk about not the MVP just yet, but the Coach of the Year, which is always a very important award. Zach, why don't you start us off with your personal pick of Coach of the Year? I've been interested to hear what this is.
Yeah, we've gone through predictions, like you said, before the show, and I wouldn't tell you whether you were right or wrong, but I think you named about every coach you could name without naming the one you thought I would get. And with all that being said, I'm glad to introduce your 2021 NFL Coach of the Year as none other than Mike Tomlin.
Ooh, interesting. It's a very interesting choice, but I can definitely see where you're coming from there. Tell me more about that one.
With this Steelers team that you can argue has been the least talented, I won't call them untalented, least talented team that they've had in probably a decade. Still able to lead the Steelers to the playoffs.
And a winning record.
Has never had a losing record in his career with the Steelers, and has dealt with Le'Veon Bell, Antonio Brown, Juju and his dancing, Chase Claypool and his dancing as well after plays, and whatever else they got going on inside that locker room. So
celebrating with the clock still running, basically.
yeah, we pull out some mid-game dance moves since the game was going on too long. But to keep all those personalities in order with a 39-year-old quarterback, I think Mike Tomlin doesn't get enough credit with everything that he's done. And yeah, he might have looked good because of the Colts helping him out a little bit, but they still had to go and beat the Ravens, beat the Browns, beat the Titans their last 3 games, their last 3 wins. So I don't think we can understate what Mike Tomlin has done with the Steelers both this year, but as well as every other year he's been in Pittsburgh as well.
I totally agree with you there. Mike Tomlin is definitely one of the greatest coaches to ever coach football, but I don't agree with you on him being this year's Coach of the Year. I just think that record's a little bit too small there. But you did happen to guess the person I picked for Coach of the Year, at least in your 2 guesses for my Coach of the Year pick. And that pick was Mike Vrabel, which might honestly surprise a lot of people considering Matt LaFleur is a coach, 13-3, whatever. We can talk about all that stuff later. Mike Vrabel has led a Titans team with an underperforming Julio Jones, who just scored his first touchdown in Week 18, and an injured Derrick Henry, who was apparently the centerpiece, the only good player on the team, according to NFL Twitter, to the first seed in the AFC, despite all the competition within the conference between the Chiefs, the Colts, the Bengals, the Patriots, the Bills. Every team in that conference is a very competitive team, and the Titans have led their way straight through to the top number 1 seed, all thanks to their head coach Mike Vrabel. Their offense has been average at best throughout the entire season. I believe they're like 15th, 17th in terms of all their various offensive stats. But defensively, they're top 10, they're top 5. Their defense has been completely unstoppable. And Mike Vrabel, one of the better defensive coaches in the league, has coached this team to have one of the best defense in the league, and ultimately, defense wins championships. So we might just have to see what Mike Vrabel can do from now on, but he certainly had one of the best regular seasons we've seen from the Titans in a long time.
Yeah, this is one of the Titans' best seasons that you mentioned, obviously, and I think that's exactly right. They're 12-5 without Derrick Henry, and I don't think many coaches could have pulled that off. And I think with the pieces they have going on right now, they are going to be a tough out for any team. Have to beat them at home if you want to win the Super Bowl as an AFC team, and they're 7-2 at home. They're not going to go down easy, and they have activated Derrick Henry off the IR, so not going to get any easier for all those teams in the AFC, but that's what the playoffs are for. Get the best of the best and see what you have to offer.
Let's talk about the big headline of this video as we talk about who our MVP picks are. Zach, why don't you start us off on this one?
I really hope there's not too much of a debate on this one, and I hope both you on the podcast and everyone else that's listening right now is thinking the exact same thing that I'm thinking when you try and decide on who the NFL MVP is going to be, and that has got to be Aaron Rodgers.
Ooh.
Now, I hope you didn't listen to a Week 1 podcast before this started, as we were bashing Aaron Rodgers and everything that he did in his 38-3 loss to the New Orleans Saints, but since then, I'll give you his season stats. 37 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. Or if you want to go everything after week 1, 37 touchdowns and 2 interceptions. He hasn't thrown an interception since the Seahawks game in November 14th. The next time they'll play will be after January 14th. That'll be 2 straight months without an interception from Aaron Rodgers, as well as him doing it on a broken toe, COVID toe, no toe, whatever it is. Aaron Rodgers is unstoppable right now. Top 10 in yards, top 5 in touchdowns, fewest interceptions in the league, and number 1 in QBR. Not many other options besides Aaron Rodgers for the MVP award this year.
There's not many options other than Aaron Rodgers, but I'd have to say, of all things, there is one option that'll take over Aaron Rodgers, and that's basically the person in the same position who's number 1 in just about every stat that isn't QBR, and that's the old man himself, Tom Brady, who just never seems to age. He's found the fountain of youth. I think that the best way for a non-quarterback to win MVP is to finish the season with a bang, but obviously Jonathan Taylor didn't do that, and that would have been my MVP pick if it weren't for, well, the poor performance. He has thrown for the most yards of his career this year, the second most touchdowns of his career. Brady has had one of a hell of a season for the fact that he's, 44, 45 years old? His youth just never seems to end, and I think that's going to be exemplified with him winning another MVP trophy that's going to be added to that trophy case of him that has been growing and growing for 20-something odd years.
But Antonio Brown said he wasn't a very good person. That should count for something.
Maybe it does count for something, but I'm not so sure about that one. We definitely talked about Antonio Brown a lot last week, and you can certainly go check that one out. But I think it's time for us to wrap up this episode. Why don't you think so as well, Zach?
I think so. It's been a long, fun, entertaining, comical, I don't know what other words you can use to describe it, but been a fun season. But as of right now, there's only 14 teams that'll play another game this season.
Well then,
and now it's time to try and predict who will come out on top in those 14 teams.
Absolutely. Let's start talking about our first official playoff brackets. Obviously, we've been waiting for this moment for a very, very, very long time at this point. So let's start talking about our brackets. Zach, would you like to start us off, or would you like me to start us off with a bit of a lightning strike rather than a bang?
You can give us a few lightning strikes. See what we got going on.
Alright. I'll start things off then and start on the AFC side of the bracket. The first wildcard round. We have the Bengals and the Raiders, and I'm going to have to give that one to the Bengals. They've just been too strong of a team, too exciting of a team, and ultimately the Raiders have snuck their way into the playoffs by not choosing a tie with the Chargers. So I'm going to have to give this one to the Bengals here. They're just too dominant of a team. Next up, I've got the Patriots and the Bills. And obviously earlier this season, I said the Bills were going to win the Super Bowl in Week 1. So obviously they're not going to be losing in the first round anytime soon. I'm going to have to take the 3-seeded Bills. Next up, it's the Steelers and the Chiefs. The Chiefs are just too strong of a team. The Steelers have stole their way into the playoffs, so I'm going to have to say that this one's going to the Chiefs. On the NFC side, there's the Bucs and the Eagles. This one's a pretty easy one. MVP Tom Brady is winning this game for sure. Next up, it's the Cowboys and the 49ers, and I might surprise you with this one, because I don't think that the Cowboys are going to win a game in this year's playoffs. I think that they're going to be a first-round exit to the 6-seed 49ers. And last but not least, it's the Rams and the Cardinals, a classic rematch that we've seen twice already this season, and I think in the third game of the season, this one's gotta go to the Cardinals. Next up, it's the divisional round between the Bengals and Titans, 4-seed and 1-seed. I'm gonna have to pick the 1-seeded Titans on this one. That defensive powerhouse is absolutely going to completely shut down Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase basically anybody at this point. Next up is the Chiefs and the Bills, and I'm going to do another surprise on this one and say that the Bills are going to upset the Chiefs in round 2. We're going to see a second round exit out of Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs. That'll be interesting to see. Next up, it's the 2-seeded Buccaneers and the 5-seeded Cardinals, and I think I have to stick with my guns on this one and say that the Cardinals are going to win their way past Tom Brady and the Bucs. Unfortunately, we're not going to see another curse broken by Tom Brady anytime soon. And lastly, it's the 1st-seeded Packers and the 6th-seeded 49ers. I'm going to have to choose the Packers on this one. I think the 49ers will have a great upset in round 1, but it's just not going to happen against Aaron Rodgers and the Green Bay Packers unless we see some sort of COVID issue happening. But I don't see that happening, and ultimately it's not my job to predict viruses, so let's move on to the AFC Championship between the Titans and the Bills. Always a classic, always reminiscent of the Music City Miracle for both of these teams. And I'm going to have to say that this one is not going to have any Music City Miracle, as we're going to see the Bills come out on top over the 1-seeded Titans. On the other end of things, we have the 5-seeded Cardinals and the 1-seeded Packers. Now, I've said a lot of things this season, especially about Cliff Kingsbury and how bad he has been as a coach, at least in the second half of the season, but I think that Cliff Kingsbury is going to get his shit together and get the dub over the Packers to make it to the Super Bowl, because I'm sticking with my guns and saying that the Super Bowl, won by the Buffalo Bills, is going to be between the Bills and the Cardinals.
Sticking to your guns all the way up to a fault right there. But I guess you went all the way through, and now it's my turn to go.
I haven't seen anything to prove me wrong yet. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, you've been accurate so far on a lot of your picks, but I'll go through mine, see if I can be half as accurate. Starting with the Raiders and Bengals, I think the Raiders were lucky to get in, and I think the Bengals will send them back to Las Vegas pretty easily. Then you go with another AFC East matchup between the Patriots and the Bills. Bills will come out on top in this one, just like they did the last time these two teams played. I know Mac Jones won't be able to keep up his Rookie of the Year powers against the Bills. Josh Allen will overpower him. And then between the Steelers and Chiefs, the Steelers gonna party all night, get into the playoffs, and then get humiliated by the Chiefs, just like they did, I think it was 2 weeks ago when they lost 36-3 or 36-10. Then on the NFC side of things, in the first round, Tom Brady beat the Philadelphia Eagles pretty easily. I'll continue up, and maybe it won't be too much of a surprise to you with my dislike for the Cowboys. I'm gonna take the San Francisco 49ers over Dallas in Dallas. And then in the 4-5 matchup in the Rams-Cardinals game, I'm going to take the Los Angeles Rams, who are going to be really hard to beat now with Cam Akers back in the lineup recovering from his torn Achilles just in time for the playoffs. And then between the number 1 Tennessee Titans and the number 4 Bengals, I'm actually going to go with the Cincinnati Bengals.
Ooh, interesting.
Joe Mixon and Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase are going to have too much talent for that stout Tennessee Titans defense and outscore Tannehill, Derrick Henry, and A.J. Brown. And then between the Bills and the Chiefs, I'm going to go with the Kansas City Chiefs.
That one's not too terribly surprising out of that one.
Yeah, I know I had them in my preseason prediction as well, and I'll get them at least to the AFC Championship, and we'll see after that. Then we'll have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers versus,
Los Angeles Rams.
and I'll go with the Buccaneers in this one as well. Between the
49ers.
and the Packers, I'm going to go with the Packers. And then that leaves us with the conference championships between the Bengals and the Chiefs. I'm going to have to take the Cincinnati Bengals.
Ooh,
Bengals are going to go all the way to the Super Bowl.
interesting.
In the Super Bowl, they are going to face Aaron Rodgers and the Green Bay Packers.
Wow.
Packers gonna figure out a way to beat Tom Brady, another classic Rodgers-Brady duel. Maybe the final chapter in matchups between those two. And then in the Super Bowl, between the Cincinnati Bengals, of all teams, and the Green Bay Packers, I'm going to take the Green Bay Packers to win the Super Bowl. And as much crap as we gave Aaron Rodgers in week 1, he'll have the turnaround of all turnarounds and lead this team to another Super Bowl.
Well, hopefully in this Super Bowl between the Bengals and Packers, we won't have to watch a field goal miss-off between Mason Crosby and Evan McPherson, but that's a very interesting pick to have the Bengals and the Packers in the Super Bowl. I don't know. We'll just have to see how our brackets go. They're very, very, very vastly different from each other, but I'm surprised you have the Bengals going all the way and then faltering at the end. That's a very surprising pick.
Bengals just have so many weapons on offense, and if you talk about any AFC North team, you know they're going to have a great defense.
Except for the
So,
Browns.
yeah, the Browns are the Browns. If there's a way to leave a division, the Browns might be forced out of that division. But back to the Bengals, between Joe Burrow, Joe Mixon, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd, just have weapon after weapon after weapon, and I think that's why the Bengals will be able to overpower so many other teams, is the mix of defense and offensive weapons.
It is a very, very interesting choice. We'll just have to see what happens, but for now, that's all we have time for. I'm surprised we've kept this within the hour, but hey, we did it! We've made it to the playoffs, and now we just have to see how our picks go from here. We've given out our brackets, we've talked about our awards. How are we feeling about today, Zach?
Feeling good. I don't know if I want to feel sad about the 14, 15 teams ending their season now, but I'm also excited and what's going to happen for the next few weeks as we lead up to the Super Bowl in February.
Absolutely, but we'll just have to take it week by week as we give you a podcast episode every week, but for now, it's time for us to lock up and shut down.